What about the fact that like it seems like it's been impossible to link violent video games to violent behavior?
Do you think a piece of media could be like inherently evil? Like, let's say, let's stick to porn then.
I feel like there has to be some sort of like agency on the thing. It has to be able to make a choice. So like, for instance, I wouldn't call a bear that eats children evil. I wouldn't call a tree that falls on somebody evil. And I don't think I would call a film that depicts an evil act evil. I think that would be, yeah.
Okay, but you would, but that act would still be evil.
Sure, but I don't think the depiction of it would be evil. But the distribution or the consumption of it could theoretically be, because those are all things involving agents, but yeah. Hi, what's up? I'm streaming. Don't say anything crazy.
Keep it tame.
What?
We'll keep it tame.
Oh, okay. What's up? I think you DM me about abortion something or something like that, right? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought your past debate didn't really go anywhere.
True.
Oh.
Wait, are you a pro-lifer?
I am pro-life, yeah. But we're talking about pornography, right? Should I say corn?
Oh yeah, no, we don't do that shit here. Fuck, okay, never mind. I remember your emails now. I'm sorry. I didn't sleep much last night. Okay, you wanted to talk about pornography, negative effects, and all that. Yeah, okay. What's up?
Yeah, I guess I'll state kind of my opinion, and then we can go from there.
Sure. Do you want to introduce yourself for the chat and all that?
Sure. Hi, my name is Julia. I used to have a channel called Brave the World. I did a variety of content, pro-gun stuff, kind of ANCAP things I no longer believe in, and I was one of the first like anti-feminist YouTubers.
Damn.
But yeah, so like all the weird red pill stuff that's like 10 years after me is kind of like cringe to me now.
Wow,
I never went that far. I think a lot of it is kind of funny now.
I missed your big come up.
I'm glad.
Okay, well, what's up?
Too much drama.
Yeah. Wait, where do you mind saying where you're from? What country?
I'm from Canada.
Are you like from Quebec or?
No, I'm from Ontario. I'm from Russia originally, but I lived in Ontario a long time, and I live in Texas now.
God, Jesus. Okay, I was politely trying to figure out where your accent was from, but okay, cool.
Oh, I know it's a weird mix of like Canada land and Russia.
Gotcha.
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna like state my ideal position because I think that's like not helpful. The way I like to talk about these things is like what kind of change I would love to see that's actually pragmatic and that could happen within 5 years, like through social or legal change.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, my main concern is exposure of minors to pornography, which has gone up a lot. The average age of exposure is 11, and like 1 in 10 in some countries of children under the age of 16 are exposed. So that's kind of my main concern, and I don't really see a reason why pornography isn't behind a paywall to help that happen. Like, we have loads of other things that we don't allow children to access, and they're all behind paywalls, and pornography for some reason gets a pass on that. So yeah, that's kind of my main goal and concern. Do you have any like strong opinions on that?
Sure. I guess we can start at the very, 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 very beginning. What do we think are the harmful effects of children being exposed to pornography, I guess?
Sure. What's your standard of proof? Like, do you accept survey results? Do you accept correlative studies? Like, what would you say?
I mean, it depends on what you have. I mean, it depends on the topic, but like if we were talking like medicine, then my standard's gonna be a lot higher than, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, with social things like this, especially with like something that's difficult to measure and something that may be harmful, like you can't really do double blinds and you can't
of course,
test
I
on
understand.
kids and all that stuff, okay? Mm-hmm. So there's a wide range of studies on pornography. There's like the brain scans, there's like the survey results, there's the correlative studies. The most interesting to me are ones that show issues to begin with, and then with reduction of porn use, those issues get better. That's like an adult, but specifically for children, there was a huge study released this year, actually. It was a report by the Children's Commissioner for England, and they took 500 transcripts from two different sources in the country. One being like a witness evidence thing for when they're doing criminal proceedings. So these are like actual charged crimes that they're investigating, and they're using the witness evidence, which is a lot of the time transcripts from interviews. And then also the sexual assault center in England. So that's like accumulatively 500 transcripts from those two government sources. And they're all people under the age of 18. I think the youngest is like, most of it is like between 10 and 16. Those are the ages. And this is child-on-child sexual crimes.
Okay.
So they are taking the reports from those instances and going through them, parsing through them, and seeing if there's any correlation to porn use, porn exposure. And they found a 50% instance of very specific pornographic descriptors mentioned, with sometimes the children literally saying, oh, I watched this and then I did this. So there does seem to be some correlation between at least early exposure and like the viewing of like the more violent stuff to kids enacting those things on each other. And I mean, the argument there could be like, are these kids, like, are they going to be criminals no matter what? And is the pornography just pushing them to do more horrible things? It's very difficult to say like pornography is causing them to do the crime to begin with. But I think looking at such a wide range of data and with such specific instances, like you can kind of like from common sense say, yeah, it looks like these children are doing things they were exposed to.
Okay.
That was the conclusion of the report, and they are trying to pass legislation based on these findings. So that's actually like the most interesting study recently that I've seen. Yeah, so in terms of kids, that's the main one. And I think there's like a lot of things with children where you can like intuit like, is this good, is this bad, without like doing a significant study. Like there's loads of stuff we don't allow kids with to do or to be exposed to that like we don't have hard data to prove that it's bad for them. We just like don't do it to err on the side of caution.
Okay, what are your what would be like a proposed change, I think, that you think would be helpful?
I think if you make free pornography illegal, it would, I would estimate like 90% reduce exposure to children, because a lot of this exposure is accidental or child to child. And if you put all pornography behind a paywall, then a child on their own will not be able to access it without like stealing a credit card or like being shown where to go. It's a much greater barrier to entry.
So here's where my mind goes. So I agree with you in that it would probably reduce the amount of children accessing it. That's almost for sure going to be true. I agree it's probably harmful to have children, I say especially like under the age of 14 for sure, like exposed to pornography. I would definitely agree with that.
Oh, good. Great. I'm not that surprised you agree, because you're a reasonable person.
Well, okay, I also love porn though, so okay, calm down.
We can get to the adult, like if we end up agreeing on most of the child stuff, we can actually debate the adult stuff.
Sure, that's fine. I'm trying to think of like, if something was harmful to children, would it be okay to like compel an industry to require paywalls for everybody to access a certain thing? It would probably significantly reduce porn industry in the United States. Probably, if I had to guess, I'd say probably like 70%, but go ahead.
We already do that, right?
What do you
Like
mean?
we don't, like in Canada, there's laws like you can't give out alcohol for free even to adults. There's loads of paywall things for substances and even other types of media to some extent. Like we
Well, yeah, but
like
you can't
if
really
someone
make
went and
those
did,
things like free, right? That you can't make. Giving away free alcohol is probably never going to be a good business strategy, but
well, I mean, sampling is a thing. It's kind of like a loophole. But like, I just mean as a society, like if someone sets up a vendor and is like giving samples of cigarettes to kids, like that's not gonna be okay. But probably in some areas, like you could probably do that to adults. But even with that, like you're not really allowed to do these things. Like you can't even advertise cigarettes and alcohol, I think. You can't advertise cigarettes for sure now. I don't know about alcohol. In some countries you can.
What do you think is the political support for mandating paywalls on like all pornography? Do you think, or like popularly, like do you think there's political support for it among the population?
Among the population, I guess it depends which population you would poll.
Like
I
the voting
think,
population?
well, okay. Yeah, I bet it's like 50-50 like most issues in this country, right? I think people are uninformed. I think a lot of people don't realize that kids are exposed so early, so they don't see it as an issue. Like,
I would
but
believe
then-
that for people like over the age of like 35
Yes, yeah,
or over the,
yes.
yeah, for younger people
agree.
though, right? Yeah.
They were all exposed early, so they know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just depends on like what their trajectory was, like whether they're like sex positive or not, like whether they changed their mind on it or not. But a lot of people don't have kids and don't like want kids, so it might not even be like an issue for them, so they wouldn't support it. But I think on like an intuitive general level, like if you just talk to random people on the street, whether they don't want to say something that's like socially taboo or not, they would probably say like, yeah, kids probably shouldn't be watching pornography, like and like could we minimize the exposure? And I think like if you're going to talk to maybe even like the pro pornography people and like the positive sex people, you could kind of pitch it in a way that like, well, if you put free porn behind a paywall, like wouldn't that drive more money towards independent female creators on like OnlyFans, where it's like a safer environment? Like that could be a progressive pitch to do this kind of action.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, yeah. Like, this wouldn't really, whatever policy you're talking about wouldn't affect, it wouldn't affect, like, OnlyFans at all, right? Except for people that have free OnlyFans, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why not make all pornography, like, behind paywall, and, like, it just becomes better content for all, with, like, no sacrificing the kids kind of thing, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I just like, I literally don't see the upside. Like, you can argue about this too, whether it's kids or adults. Like, what is the upside for like free pornography for everyone? Like, what is the upside? Cummies? I mean, that's not the best argument. in my opinion.
That's a pretty good argument for some people.
I mean, for like on an individual level, but societally, like, I don't think that's an argument really. Like, oh, it feels good. Well, so is heroin feels great too.
I think if you want to,
that.
I mean, I think if you want to fight on that level, I feel like there's been quite a bit of data released at this point that shows that wide availability to pornography does actually decrease the amount of sex crimes that happen in a country. I think Portugal was the largest place where they studied that. Go ahead.
I've heard that, but I think whichever those statistics go, whichever way they go, it's really hard to isolate for other things. So like right now, especially during and after COVID, sex crimes and like the consumption of like horrendous sex materials went up significantly, and sexual assaults and crimes went up by 30 or so percent. So like, it's really hard to argue that because we can't have a control group. Like we can't, it could just be a general trend and porn like happened to be more available during that general trending time, right? So it's really difficult to say one way or the other.
I don't know if I buy
Like
that.
you can say,
My
like, you can
understanding
say
was that, like, I want to say it was Portugal. You have, like, trends for a long time of what sex crime looks like, and then they legalized, like, all types, I think, of pornography, and it might have been drugs, I don't remember. I'd have to go and check. I don't have this research offhand. I could probably Google it and look. But my understanding is that that's, like, a pretty common trend that you see in most countries.
How long, do you know how long you've seen that? Because a lot of the time there will be like a difference because of like an initial impact, and then it'll like not matter after a few years. Like this happened, I think, also in, I think it's also Portugal or some other Eastern European country somewhere. They did the whole like, they're trying to get their birth rates up, and they're now like paying women. Oh no, they're making women's income tax free if they have like more than 2 kids or something. And they had like a boom, but what people are arguing now is those were the women who were gonna have kids anyways, they just had the kids faster, so it's gonna like taper off. So I mean, those kinds of effects are kind of like,
I'm just gonna
you gotta watch out for that.
Let me speed read this real quick. Okay, legalizing pornography lowers sex crime rates, question mark. Study carried out in Czech Republic shows similar results to those in Japan and Denmark. Summary, could legalizing pornography lead to lower rates of sex crimes. A new study tackles this controversial question. Results from the Czech Republic showed that rape and other sex crimes have not increased following the legalization and wide availability of pornography. In addition, the study finds the incidence of child sex abuse has fallen since 1989, when child pornography became readily accessible. Jesus Christ.
Again, all crime has been falling for a long time, right? Like what that shows is that pornography doesn't necessarily drive sex crimes, like in a very obvious way. Like
sure. Although I would say that would be a counter then to that first kind of like correlative stuff that you had where it said that like children that were abusing other children had been exposed to hardcore porn or something, right?
Yeah, but also those things weren't as studied, like, and those aren't cohorts that are included in your statistics. So like the cohort of child on child sexual crimes isn't included in the general like violent crime rates of countries. Like they're parsed out into different statistics, and the child on child sexual crime has gone up significantly over the past.
So here's
years.
something interesting.
And it could be that it's affecting different people different ways. Like I can.
Sure. Here's something interesting too on the thing at the bottom here. Other results show that overall there was no increase in reported sex-related crimes generally since the legalization of pornography. Interestingly, whereas the number of sex-related crimes fell significantly after 1989, the number of other societal crimes, murder, assault, and robbery, rose significantly. So it seems like for this, it wasn't just the falling of all crime. I'll just link you that. This is, I think this was published in Springer. I don't know if that's a good journal or not. And you can look through that. Wait, fuck. Hold on. Wait. Springer's not even a journal. Science Daily.
I mean,
Source, Springer. I don't know. I'd have to look and see where this was.
Okay, so like, okay, I just did a really quick Google search. Like August 2nd, 2022, Ottawa, Ontario, for example. Statistics Canada says the rate of police-reported sexual assault in Canada has reached its highest level since 1996. There was more than 34,000 reports of sexual assault countrywide.
Damn.
In 2021, an 18% increase from 2020. So, I mean, again, like, it depends on what years you're looking at and, like, the other
Well, but that doesn't
factors.
sound like it's related to porn at all, right? That just sounds like an increase in crime, because there wasn't, like, legal or illegal stuff going on with pornography.
What I'm saying
right?
is it's hard to tie it directly to pornography in either direction because the sex assault crime statistics go up and down, like, every decade or so. Like, they
sure.
do change,
I
right?
agree. Yeah, there's
Porn's
stuff,
been
yeah.
legal for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm saying that
Yeah.
it challenges our preconception that it would necessarily increase crimes if we can't find any data showing that, right?
Sure, and yeah, I don't have that preconception going into it, and reading this report from England is actually bringing me back to that, but like in this specific cohort. Like
Sure.
if your brain is malleable and you're young and you're watching hardcore pornographic material that leads you to harder and harder stuff, which is a phenomenon that has been pretty well documented through at least surveys. And kids are more impressionable, just like in the way that teenage girls are affected by images on social media and like have more suicidal tendencies and blah blah blah. Like that has like a pretty strong correlative report, right? Like it's correlated to social media use. Maybe it's not caused by social media use, but like common sense tells us that there might be some sort of loose link at least.
Sure. Something that so here's a question I would have for you to challenge this. What about the fact that like it seems like it's been impossible to link violent video games to violent behavior? Like kids that play video games where they're murdering people all the time aren't going out and like murdering people or doing anything. It seems like it's been yeah. How do you? I mean, it seems to me that would be obvious. If you play a bunch of shooting, killing video games, you're probably going to want to shoot and kill people in real life. But it seems like that hasn't been acted on as much as people would have expected it to be.
Sure, and I'm with you on that. I never thought that would be a correlative thing either, or like a causal thing. I mean,
Or I mean, I would have thought it would have been. I mean, it seems to me to be. Pretty,
I was always like, yeah, like I never thought that would actually work. So maybe with violent video games, like first of all, like what is the classification of violent video games?
Any
like
FPS.
first-person shooter. Like a lot of them are cartoony and aren't like super realistic. I could imagine if you're playing something with like loads of drone strikes and like loads of super gory in your face, you know, stabbing in the back of the neck stuff. Though, like I've been a
Listen, have you ever heard of Gears of War?
I used to play games, yeah, Gears of War. But again, you know, here let me take a stab at this because
Okay.
I've thought
Not in
about
real
this a
life.
lot too.
Go ahead.
No, not in real life. video games are much easier to like for let's keep talking about kids, right? It's much easier for children to understand that this is a game, and even if it's super gory and violent, they understand that this is like pixels on a screen in a computer. When you're watching pornography, it's real people. So I would argue, I would be consistent with this argument and say watching horrendously gory movies where like the people are real, like it's real people. I mean, they're not actually dying, but the gore and the impression that the brain receives is much more realistic versus most first-person shooters. So maybe that's a significant importance. Also, like there's a way higher barrier to entry to like take an AK and shoot up a bunch of people, like because you saw it in a game, versus like, you know, diddling your cousin because like you've been subjected to hardcore pornography since you were 5 or whatever. Like the barrier to entry of those like two acts are totally different. Like I think that's kind of valid.
Okay.
Okay, so we mostly agree on the child stuff. Like, probably isn't great for kids to be exposed to this stuff. Whether there's like a direct correlation between violent acts or not, it's probably just not good to err on the side of caution. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think generally children being exposed to pornography is probably not good. Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy one to agree on. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let me like ask you a more like interesting question then. Do you think a piece of media could be like inherently evil? Like, let's stick to porn then. Let's say like a woman was, things were done to her without her consent on film, and that media exists and it's online, okay? And then like the woman died, all the perpetrators died, everyone that's ever been involved or close to any of these people has died. So it's like this kind of like piece of vile media exists in a vacuum. It's not like negatively affecting anyone in like a real sense because like they're related to the person or something. Like, is that piece of media like evil or like neutral or?
Oh man, is the piece of media itself evil?
Yeah, like what is depicted? What is the depiction? You know what I mean.
I feel like when I say whether or not something is good or bad or good or evil, I feel like there has to be some sort of like agency on the thing. It has to be able to make a choice. So like, for instance, I wouldn't call a bear that eats children evil. I wouldn't call a tree that falls on somebody evil. And I don't think I would call a film that depicts an evil act evil. I think that would be, yeah.
Okay, but that act would still be evil.
Sure, but I don't think the depiction of it would be evil. But the distribution or the consumption of it could theoretically be, because those are all things involving agents, but yeah.
Okay, so you wouldn't argue that like, well, it's not hurting anyone, so let people watch that stuff then.
Well, it could be hurting somebody,
dead.
but I could still want it to be viewable, right? Depending on how I feel about my First Amendment rights.
Well, in the case I gave you.
Well, yeah, here. So very specifically, what is your question for me?
Okay, a woman is having not consensual sex on a video, okay? Everyone that has ever known the woman or the perpetrators are dead, so there's no like direct negative, like, because you can argue like, oh, well, if her family sees it, that's like a negative real life effect, right? Does this media like existing online, is that like evil for it to exist and for people to watch it?
Fuck. I lean towards no. Like 55% no.
Why?
I just don't know if it would be evil to consume something like that. Well, hold on. Let me think.
I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. You can think about it. Like, that's a hard question.
Well, so yeah,
right?
so I'm trying to compare it to like so here's what I'm comparing it to. My gut feeling says no, but then I'm trying to think of like, what if somebody records somebody having sex non-consensually and they want to like release that to the public? would the consumption of that be unethical? And I lean towards yes on that. But now I'm thinking, is it actually the consumption that's unethical, or is it making it available to everybody that's unethical and the consumption is neutral? And I think I'm leaning more towards that. So I feel like consumption of a given item is probably not the unethical thing, because you're not necessarily harming anybody by consuming it, but by having made it available to somebody, I feel like that would be the unethical part. So I think just the consumption of something I would not say is unethical. I think that's where I would lean towards, yeah.
The distribution of it is.
Correct.
Because that person never consented.
Correct. And you could even stretch this to say that like linking your friend a video of something that was leaked might be unethical, because you're also like working in a way to kind of distribute it even more. I think that's how I would lean towards that, yeah. But I don't think just the consumption of a thing can ever be considered immoral or unethical. Like if I'm watching something that somebody didn't want made originally, I don't know if I could ever say that's unethical.
Okay, like what if like it's like a video of like an animal being tortured and people are like watching it and laughing? Like, is that neutral as well?
I would say so, yeah. Assuming these aren't people that like commissioned the video, or they're not the like direct purchasers of it or something. Yeah, I would say probably not unethical, no.
And can you defend that a little bit? Like why isn't,
I think to
like, don't
make
you
it
think you're
unethical,
participating in something?
Nope.
Like, does your intention matter there? Like, if you're like watching, you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. Like, yeah, it's not unethical that you saw it. But if you're like, oh, haha, cat getting skinned on camera, like, is that not unethical?
No,
what would attitude of it?
What would be the unethical part? That would be you would have to give me, the onus is on you to say it. I think you could say, is it unethical to enjoy the misfortune of somebody else or the suffering of somebody else? I don't know if I would say that's necessarily unethical. It's certainly not virtuous, but I don't know, like, you're not causing harm to somebody there at all. Like, nobody's being harmed if I get killed on a video and 1 million people watch it. The harm to me isn't increasing or whatever.
Yeah, but harm can go both ways, right? So I guess I would argue the fact that, well, like, objectively, because it's depicting something that is unethical, then participating in that unethical thing, you know, makes you it's like if someone is, I can bring it to the drowning thing, right? Like if someone's drowning, you're not like, it's not your fault they're drowning, but like there's an onus on you to like help them out, not let them drown, right?
Yep, but so I don't think it's materially the same. If you're watching a cat get skinned in real life and you don't help, and you think you've got a moral compulsion to help animals, then it would be unethical for you not to do anything, for sure. But if you're just watching a video, the act's already happened. Your ability to intervene is gone. Like at that point, it's.
Okay. What about if someone's skinning a cat, and you think it's funny and okay, but you like stop them from skinning the cat anyway? Like because you should, right? Because they were doing something bad, but you think it's like you stop them from skinning the cat, but you might have stopped them from skinning the cat because you want to skin the cat yourself later.
Well, that's really loaded. If you're trying to save somebody from harm so that you can do more harm to them later, that's probably in the totality of actions.
No, I'm just saying we don't know the intention there. We know that they're laughing at the cat and they think it's funny, but they saved it anyway. So we don't know what the intention behind saving the cat is.
Well, I would argue the intention is pretty important.
That's what I would argue.
Sure, but the intention of viewing a video is not the intention to do harm, right? You're not. I guess if you really thought you were hurting somebody, like if somebody told you, if you look at this video, I'm going to get raped again, and you watch it just to hope that'll happen, that would make it unethical. But
so I guess like this line of questioning is more like, okay, if we take the big study from England that came out this year that I quoted about the children, right? And we take at face value and we err on the side of caution and we say, yes, in some kids, hardcore viewing of pornographic images can lead them to reenact those things in real life and cause harm more so than they would have without viewing it. Like, let's say that's a given. Then by that, I would say that, yeah, watching a cat getting skinned and laughing or whatever, and that being accessible to people and like ethically neutral is bad.
Well, hold on. You said a lot of different things there. Being accessible to people, doing the video, and watching the video. Okay. These are all like very different things. Yeah,
okay, someone watching the video, it exists, and they're laughing at it, and blah, blah, blah. And if they're watching the video, it's accessible, right? So, I mean, that would be a net negative for society. Like if you take it to its logical extreme, if like people are okay with watching videos like that,
Sure,
and they're okay
but we gotta
with
be really
torturing
careful.
animals, then
Yeah, but we got to be really careful. Like, if something is a net negative to society, does that necessarily make it immoral or bad?
well, doesn't negative kind of imply that there's like some sort of moral underpinning to it being negative?
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to figure out like what's the rule that we're like appealing to here. Like if I like let's say I could be like pretty talented as like a doctor, but I decide I want to be like an artist instead. Like that's kind of a net negative to society, but is that like an immoral choice I'm making?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I would be happy if like the most extreme things kind of like
I'm trying to think
you know
of like,
what I mean? Like
yeah, I'm trying to think of like
yeah, I get it. I get like, but you don't always have to like go to the. I get the logic. I get what you're saying, but you also could like choose to avoid the worst things without like canceling out the like meh things, right?
sure. Yeah, so like you could say that like that would be immoral, but it's like not that immoral. It would be immoral like maybe speeding is immoral.
Because I mean, like with correlative stuff in general, like you can argue a lot of things. Viewing a lot of things online is like a net negative for like people, individuals, and society. But is it worth like shutting the internet down?
Yeah, that was kind of that's where I was going, because
say
there's probably a
no.
lot of stuff that's correlative with like negative
Yeah.
stuff, but
Yeah.
like would we say that all of it is necessarily immoral? Maybe we could say all of it is immoral, like is eating foods high in sugar
maybe-
immoral, or
And yes, like yeah, exactly. Like I would like in a ideal world, like sugar isn't accessible to children like everywhere they go. You know, it doesn't lead anywhere good. But is it so bad that we should like make a law against it? I don't know. Maybe it is, but there's a lot of room here, like for gray area, without like throwing everything out.
sure. I guess yeah, because you're moving forward to like a policy position, like you want to make something legal or illegal, or
Yes.
yeah. So I'm thinking the bar there probably has to be pretty high, because we probably should have the right to pursue a lot of things that might not necessarily benefit society, or might even be somewhat detrimental to society, maybe, right? Like doing drugs. Should marijuana and everything be illegal, or maybe you feel that way? Like there are a lot of things.
Honestly, it depends. Like it depends on all the other factors in society. Like I hate arguments in a vacuum. Like this is why I didn't even give my like ideal. Like oh yes, of course. I wish like porn didn't exist at all and children were never hurt and women didn't feel the need to make pornography because like they can get good jobs or like their husbands can get good jobs. Whatever. It's not in a vacuum, right? Like these things exist for certain reasons, and I think they've just kind of spiraled out of control. So like I have a like pretty low standard of like being happy with like some laws passing, and like if we could reduce the exposure of kids to pornography under the age of 16 by like 50%, I would be thrilled.
Sure.
Like
Okay.
that doesn't mean like you have to jump to like ban all porn overnight, whether I want to or not.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I don't think I would say that. Yeah. So I think I would still stick with my original position. I don't think the consumption of a thing that was made immorally. I don't think the consumption of that is necessarily immoral. I think I would stay with that position, unless you have another argument for me.
Yeah, I get. What if like it's shown that it like does negatively hurt the viewer? Like, would that be immoral?
If you could show with like a high degree of accuracy and like that you're
Like
having,
you do like a brain scan and like your amygdala lights up in the violent parts and like you start having, or like let's say
sure,
it's,
like if you
very
could show
well
that like if somebody
documented.
watched something, like the chances of you to commit violent crime go up by like 500% or something, there's probably, I mean there's going to be some number there, right, where I would say that this is probably immoral, right? If there was like a hypnotism device where if you watched it you were guaranteed to go out and rape or kill somebody afterwards, I'd say it's probably immoral to look at the hypnotism device. I would say that absolutely.
Okay.
But
Okay,
it's
cool.
yeah, it's just going to depend, I guess, on how the numbers play out, because, and then also how many other choices you can make after watching the thing, because we tend to like not be highly deterministic when we view the choices people make. We take into account their backgrounds a little bit, but like we would say like you can consume the media, but just don't do the bad thing, you know.
Well, that's a good segue into like the adult stuff, because okay, here's like a consent thing. Like we know that kids are exposed to pornography around the average age of 11, and it's like on the high estimates 1 out of 10, and the lower estimates like half. Okay, depends on the country. Do you think like let's stick with female porn actors, whatever you want to call them, female sex workers, because that's the majority of them. Do you think female sex workers, like how much bodily autonomy and consent can you prescribe on like the average woman who was exposed to pornography, let's say once a week from the age of 11? Do you think there's like some kind of safe assumption there that she has been programmed to like accept certain things being done to her body or accept certain ways of promoting herself sexually, etc.? Like, it's not in a vacuum. Like, do you think this plays a role in the fact that so many young women are perfectly okay with showcasing their bodies, not even necessarily in porn, but like just in general, promiscuity, pornography, being over-sexualized, etc.? Do you think it's like that's a conversation that isn't really happening?
Yeah, I mean, almost for sure there's probably going to be a lot of socialization that impacts how they engage with it. Yeah, I would probably agree with that, yeah.
Okay. Would you agree that it's like bad? Like, if people are going to choose to do pornography, like maybe they should actually choose it like after not being exposed to it their whole childhood? Like, that would be a more authentic choice.
Yeah, but we're getting into like very like highly deterministic evaluations of like human choice. So like, here's something that I would say. I think if you wanted to be, I might have heard radfems make this argument before. I think if you wanted to be really, really radical, you could almost make the argument that like a lot of adult women can't consent to sexual activity because of how appeasing they've been programmed in society in general. That like, so for instance, when you look at numbers like, 50% of women don't have an orgasm when they have one night stands and stuff. On one end, you could say like, oh, well, it's just because guys are lazy or blah, blah, blah. But on another end, you could also argue that like, well, it's because women have been so accustomed to just kind of like being pleasers and not really sticking up for themselves that like anytime they engage in sex.
What's funny about the radfems and that? Like,
Sure.
They kind of agree with like hyper conservative people. Like, if you're looking at the world historically from like, let's say, a orthodox religious view, the way you solve this problem is by marriage. Like, all sex outside of marriage was rape. So it's funny how it's like an inverted, it's like the same outcome, but like the logic is inverted.
Sure, because they're identifying similar problems. Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Yeah. That's I don't have a point. I'm just pointing that out.
No, yeah, I understand. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's hard to say, like, can somebody truly consent to a certain thing because of how they've been socialized? Like, I mean, when you get more and more deterministic, at some point, you're basically going to realize that, like, well, I mean, like, if you take my position, everybody is, like, fully determined from birth, essentially, for every single thing you're ever going to do. So, yeah, I don't know if I would make that decision regarding porn work versus any other work, because everybody's going to be super influenced by everything in society.
So you're like a materialist determinist.
Hardcore, I am, yeah. But I mean, also, that's like the direction that you're headed to, right, in this conversation, right? That we're saying that, like, if women have seen porn from an early age, they've been conditioned to view porn a certain way, then that probably means that when they engage in porn, the choices they're going to make there are going to be unhealthy for them personally because they've seen other people make unhealthy personal decisions relating how they do porn as well, right?
Okay.
Now, another problem that I have with that, though...
then you agree, because, I mean, like...
Well, you got to be careful, though, too, because, like, in that end, too...
You just disagree on, like, what to do about it, like...
Well, when you get highly deterministic like that, you also are... The more deterministic you get from a moral sense, the less agency you're granting somebody.
Yes.
And at some point, we're getting to a point where we're saying, like, okay, listen, I know that you want to do this, but, like, you're a woman, and so you're kind of, like, too brainwashed to make these decisions, so we're going to make them for you. That's essentially what you're saying. And I'm loading that one way to sound bad, but I mean, like, there are legitimate arguments there for men and women. But
I mean, sure, if you're framing things in, like, oh, what should we do about it, or, like, how do we legislate things, like, sure. But, like, I'm just talking general. Like, does this conditioning affect women to be more sexually open? Like, I would say 100%. And reducing childhood exposure would probably help. And then probably like the women that actually, for whatever reason, want to do sex work, maybe like we only have the more authentic women who aren't being pressured or like hurt sexually from childhood or doing it.
At some point, like measuring that is going to be almost impossible, right?
No, yeah, it is. But
I mean, conceptually,
reducing harm. Also, like from the argument of harm reduction. Okay, interesting. Let's see if I have anything else really. Well, I mean, one last thing then. Do you think there's like such thing as being like, I guess you're not religious, so like maybe spiritual is like a loaded term for you then. But do you think like there's an argument to be made for like mental clarity or like fasting for your like mental health, which includes images and the media you consume, like people do this with what they eat, what they put into their body, like they work out, etc. Like they try to have a clean and healthy physical body. Do you think there's equal type of thing for like mental health, like not watching like explicit material, whether it's like hyper violent or like hypersexual, like whatever else you want to include in that, being, you know, people will determine that for themselves obviously, but just on a personal level, like what do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm sure there's some argument to be made for that. I mean, you're essentially describing like forms of almost like meditation or fasting, right? Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, I'm sure some people
Like,
do, and I'm
like
sure
for
they...
society, do you think that would be like a good thing to promote, like not to be overstimulated by like the most hardcore images you can find?
Yeah,
'Cause
I
feel
think
like
there's a good
no one
argument to
talks
not be
about this.
overstimulated by like screens in general. I think we're more and more research has come out where we kind of are all saying that like, yeah, this is probably really bad for children, especially. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I mean, so many people push back on that a lot too, which is like funny to me. It honestly depends on your generation. Like Gen X and Boomers, like have no idea, and then like millennials who grew up online, kind of as parents, tend to limit screen time a lot more than like the older generations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I wonder if that's gonna reverse like in any way.
I mean, we'll see, I guess. When 95% of young men have like ADHD, maybe we'll start to view our habits a little bit differently.
Yeah. Okay. Any last thoughts?
No, I don't think so. Do you have any final thoughts for us?
No, that was pretty good. Yeah. Thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, no problem. Stay safe, have fun, be careful.
Okay. Bye.
Fucking thrashed her, dude. It wasn't even close. And absolutely annihilated. Oh my gosh.